Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. I am sick and tired of the news coming out of the east coast of Canada, where Mi'kmaq fishermen, in accordance with their goddamn treaty rights, are still facing terrorism from angry white locals. Now, apparently, Nova Scotia seems to have a hell of a time with racism. I talked about this in one of my videos, but the earliest recorded race riot anywhere in North America was in Shelburne, Nova Scotia. The founding of Halifax directly led to a goddamn war between the British and the Acadians, who were French, and the Mi'kmaq. Now, it's the Mi'kmaq we want to talk about today because they're the ones who live in this part of Canada. They were given, as part of, previous arrangements with French and British governments, treaty rights to this land and to fish. The current problem that's happening out there, where Mi'kmaq fishermen are facing assault and intimidation and outright terrorism from angry other commercial fishers, because they dare to have the audacity to implement some of the licenses they've been granted for out-of-season lobster hunting. I think they were allowed 7 and they're only using 3, and this is apparently worth violence and intimidation. It is so unfortunate, and I'm sure there's probably someone out there now thinking, oh, come on, is this terrorism? Bear with me for a goddamn minute. So, right now, the Mi'kmaq just want to do their kind of thing. Hunting, gathering, subsistence farming. It's for them and their local communities and for them to make a bit of money. And they are allowed to do so under treaty. And yet a lot of the commercial fishermen are saying, oh, this is unfair. We can't allow this. And they've done everything from forming fish blockades, refusing to service indigenous people, probably setting aflame an entire lobster pound, poisoning lobster catch so that it's unusable. And the police, the RCMP, sit around and do nothing. And so this brings me back to the definition of terrorism, if people think I'm just being a little hyperbolic here. The definition of terrorism is the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. What is currently happening in Nova Scotia is an act of terrorism against the indigenous people. What is happening right now is, in no uncertain terms, intimidation and the use of violence against a civilian populace that happens to be native in the attempt to get political aims accomplished. What are their political aims? They don't want them to fish and exercise their treaty rights. This is terrorism, and it deserves to be called as such. And therefore, the inaction of the RCMP is pathetic, shameful, and disgusting. I was so glad to see defund the RCMP trending yesterday as a result of this. Meanwhile, when, again, indigenous Mi'kmaq people protested in, I believe it was New Brunswick several years ago, against a pipeline because it would pollute their waters and their fishing grounds, the RCMP responded with snipers and K9 units. So clearly the RCMP have no problem reacting when they want to. It just so happens that when they're supposed to do their job and enforce treaty rights and let the natives do their thing, they can't keep actual goddamn terrorists in check. This should not be happening in 2020. We talk about reconciliation and trying to move past our absolutely terrifying and shameful history. And yet here we are still, where we have police whose job it is to prevent shit like this from happening, not doing their job, which really begs the question of their usefulness. And we have people committing actual acts of terrorism, and the government sits on its hands just hoping that maybe cooler heads prevail when they need to be the ones who show leadership. This is their responsibility. It is the federal government that is responsible on behalf of the Crown to honor indigenous treaty rights. It is their responsibility to prevent bloodshed, intimidation, violence, and acts of terrorism on our own soil. This should not be happening, and yet it is. And the fact that we don't call it terrorism and that more Canadians aren't as pissed off about this as I am is definitely what's bothering me today.